Democrats pouncing on the Canadian smoke monster smothering the East Coast as another golden opportunity to lecture Americans about climate change. The orange haze, and that's not named Donald, still billowing across the country and could last for days. The air right now is harder to breathe than when Jesse sprays on his hair in the green room.
What?
Yes, President Biden finally getting off his butt to do something about it, but didn't sound too energized.
I spoke yesterday with Prime Minister Trudeau, and I've decided, dictated a national interagency fire center response to Canada's request for additional firefighters and the fire suppression assets such as air tankers.
Trying to put the fire to sleep. Meanwhile, the climate change parrots are chirping away. More high-profile Democrats using the wildfires to push the issue. A progressive congresswoman says, quote, "Imagine being a Republican climate change denier in Congress. You show up to work at the Capitol today, see the skies filled with smoke, and you still don't get that we need bold and immediate action to save our planet. Ridiculous." And despite the pollution coming from Trudeau's trees in Canada, Liberals still claim it's the Americans who drive SUVs that are to blame.
The climate crisis is real, and it is here to stay.
To say no, it has nothing to do with climate change is naive.
Obviously, I'm no meteorologist. Whether we're talking about wildfires or storms, they're going to be more frequent, more extreme.
If anybody has any doubts, this past couple of days and what we're going to be dealing with for the next few, climate change is here.
These kinds of weather phenomena are happening all around the globe, and it's only becoming more and more common, all because of climate change.
With increasing climate change and increasing warming, we can expect more and more of these kind of wildfires.
So, Martha, one of the things that is always amazing is that people will state that, though, make those statements and never follow up with any data. It's like, and then the pronouncements are not only untethered to data, but untethered to any kind of practical solution. At least Smokey the Bear would tell you what to do. They just say, we are in trouble. We need bold solutions. And then they shut up.
It's crazy. This has nothing to do with climate change, this issue. It's like, hello, put away the graphics. It's like, get the climate change graphic up. We have a story that'll definitely work for. When you dig into this story, you'll learn that it's really about the forestation process, the fact that they haven't been able to do these kind of prescribed burns that they need in order to. It's the same problem that has happened in California. And one of the things that really strikes me now is that there's no longer environmentalism that is driving people who care about the earth. Right. It's not about environmentalism, because if it was, then you would have people taking care of the forest because they would be concerned about the animals that live there. You have to go in, you have to clear out all the underbrush, all the dead growth. You have to make sure the trees grow. You have to do the logging that's required in order to keep the forest healthy. And I see this in so many ways. It's just all about oil. If it doesn't have to do with oil, then they don't care about it at all. Mm-hmm. That's why we have wind turbines that are threatening the whale populations. That's why we have cars that are being built with batteries that have toxic things in them that no one knows how to get rid of it at the end, but it doesn't matter because it's about the oil and the gas. So it's become so myopic that they're kind of forgetting. I think about Teddy Roosevelt and even Robert Kennedy Jr., who talks about actually cleaning up the rivers and real environmentalism, which appears to be lost. Just throw up the climate change graphic and we're good.
I know. That it's a good point about RFK Jr., because when he talks about environmentalism, he talks like somebody who actually uses the environment, that he loves the earth. Meanwhile, almost all these activists don't do anything.
No.
Right. They don't. They spend all their time indoors like you, Jesse.
Are you saying Joy Reid's never been camping?
I don't think. Well, you know what? I don't know.
Are you saying she's never been canoeing, backpacking, splunking? Do you know what that is?
Yes.
That's cave exploration.
But environmentalism, true environmentalism, has been replaced by ideology.
Yep.
You could be a Democrat or Republican, but not anymore.
Well, and also it's about money, too. So if you want some statistics, from 1706 to 1910, there have been 20 so-called dark days or yellow days where the average people, they don't have TV back then, go out and then at noon it's dark or it's yellow. And these are phenomena that have happened over the last 200 years, well before the automobile. So this is normal, and what they're doing is they're preying on ignorance. Not everybody knows that burning forests from Canada has blacked out North America dozens and dozens of times over the last 300 years. They're banking on people not knowing that. I talked to my meteorological sources, and they said that there are normal temperatures in Canada, normal precipitation in Canada. There has been ordinary weather in May in Canada. This is not some extreme hot winds that has taken over Canada. This is a normal Canadian June that, because of lightning strikes and campers that put out their camels in a dry bed of poorly managed forest, that's what's happening. And so Joe Biden's taking advantage of this to push the Green New Deal so people like his donors can get paid and not people like ExxonMobil that usually donate to Republicans.
You know, Harold, in the green room, I was shocked when you said that you believe these wildfires were started by the burning of banned books from Florida.
I thought we were going to keep that conversation to ourselves.
I bet you have a different outlook on this topic.
No, I largely in line. I would say the forest management issue is a serious issue. But what we can't deny also, I think, is that the data that you present there, Jesse, 1706, I think, to 1910, I think it'd be interesting just to look from 2005 to 2023, the increasing frequency in which we're seeing some of these occurrences. Now, we can debate.
Well, they're actually down. We talked about that last night. Over the last 100 years, these forest fires are down from about 4% to about 2.5% worldwide.
So the occurrences of droughts, which contribute to the reason I think we need some of this forest management. My only point is I think we can do both. Two things can be right at once, even if it causes a little tension or consternation. We should be doing both of these things to the extent that it makes sense, meaning is it economically viable? I would agree. I think, Martha, you're right. Some Democrats who are critical of these things and want to raise the climate change issue are really doing it because of an aversion to fossil fuels, which I don't have. But I understand where they're coming from. But I always try to figure out the core of someone's answer. And even if I don't like some of their motivations, there's no doubt forest management is a problem. The occurrences of these kind of weather abnormalities are increasing. The quote you told yesterday, I think some Democrats would find that uncomfortable to know that there were dark days back in the 1700s and there were no combustible engines. That we'd be kidding ourselves if we don't believe that we are contributing to the ozone layer depletion. We'd be kidding ourselves if we're saying, well, whether you agree we are or not, something is. And I think we've got to try to figure that out. And while we try to figure it out, even if we can't agree on it, we ought to agree on steps we can take to try to reverse it. Forest management has to be a part of it. And we have to get serious about wondering, why are these droughts occurring? Why are hurricanes more likely are happening across the country? And for that matter, why are we having these weather abnormalities across the country? These are questions I think public policymakers should be thinking about if they can subtract out some of the politics.
But the problem here, Judge, is that if they do actually have some kind of meeting of the minds, then all of these activists are out of a job, right? They have to have this. They have to have this us versus them thing.
Everything is about us versus them. You can talk about spaghetti in a supermarket, and they'll figure out some way to divide it into
rigatoni.
The left. Rigatoni. The other guy.
Roof spaghetti.
Okay, but you know what? But the thing is, if these environmentalists, I mean, it's not just the environmentalists, right? The climate change is the latest pretty issue that we're going to dump billions into. We've already dumped billions into. But if they're so concerned about the environment, you know, what they're saying is, you know, that they're not involved in the controlled burns, where you get rid of the underbrush, to Martha's point, what you were talking about. The United States, in order to protect forest and to take care of those areas that are in danger of burning, we've done 150,000 controlled burns. Okay, do you know how many Canada's done?
12.
23.
That was close.
Okay,
Michael Jordan.
Canada is just like Gavin Newsom in terms of how he was handling forest management. And then they want to blame it all on climate change. It's not about climate change. It's about your ability to see what's going on and to prevent it. And maybe they don't want to do any of this because they want to save the spiders who are under the wood, who are under the ground in case they have a controlled burn. But let me tell you one more thing. This reminds me of Palestine, Ohio, that we have moved on from. We suffered for 2 days, and we're all in a tizzy, right? These people in Palestine, Ohio, suffered and will continue to suffer, and they've been forgotten, okay? And the last thing I want to say is this. Joe Biden gets up there and he says, we're going to put together a national interagency fire response to work with Canada. No, you're the president of the United States. They have done something that has harmed people in the United States. Another president would have said, what are you doing to stop this? Why is this happening? This is a serious health hazard for the people in my country. But what does Biden do? He joins the wrongdoing. He creates this ideological issue and says, we'll put more money in it. Our money.
There you go. I'm old enough to remember 10 minutes ago when she said she didn't know what she was going to say today.
I didn't.
Hey, do trees have a gender?
We can give them one.
No, it's just I'm just curious. Is there a he, she, or are they non-binary?
Yes, some of them don't have.
Because that's where the money should go.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever had like a gardenia tree, some of them don't blossom and some of them do.
There's another one, though, like 2 holly trees, you have to have 2.
Right, to get them to, you know how it works.
There you go.
Jesse, you got an opinion on this?
Well, I just saw one time there was a tree that like grew into another tree.
Right.
And they tangle up.
Yes.
You know what that's about.
You know. Yeah. All right.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.